Rebuild, Renew, Resurge. Hold the Line, hosted by Just the News Editor-in-Chief John Solomon. Join Real America's Voice and Just the News. Sponsored by Heritage Action for America. The next 2 to 4 years are crucial. Hold the Line.
Hello, America, and welcome to a Just the News special event, Hold the Line. I'm John Solomon, Editor-in-Chief of Just the News, and I'll be your host this evening. Now, every time a new political party takes back power in Washington, the opposing party has 3 missions: renew, rebuild, and resurge. But most Americans never get to see how that happens. Tonight, though, we're going to have a special special partnership with our grassroots group, Heritage Action for America. We are going to give you an inside look at how the conservative movement is recalibrating after the November 2020 election. We've got an all-star lineup for you, but before we get started, I'd like you to learn a little bit about our partner and our sponsor tonight. Take a look at this.
We're in a cultural battle. That's why Heritage Action created the Sentinel program, to empower conservatives to speak up, take action, and to hold your lawmakers accountable. And when Sentinels speak, Congress listens. Together, we're going to hold the line and advance conservatism for generations to come.
Now, one of the battlegrounds in Washington right now is the U.S. Senate, where a 50-50 split between the parties has left Vice President Kamala Harris in the position to break a lot of tie votes. And with the razor-thin margin, there's been a lot of recent speculation that Democrats may attempt to remove the filibuster, essentially expanding the power of majority Democrats by eliminating a key procedural step. Now, that step has been designed for decades to ensure the chamber only votes on policies supported by a large portion of the members, usually 60 or more. Now, tonight we are lucky to have 2 guests at ground zero in this battle. Joining us from Washington is Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas, as well as Jessica Anderson, Executive Director of Heritage Action for America. Senator, Jessica, welcome to the show.
John, good to be with you.
It's an honor to have you. Senator, let me start with you. We've been hearing a lot about getting rid of the filibuster, but to do that, all Democrats would have to support such a move. We heard this week that Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, 2 Democrats from swing states, won't support that. What do you think happens with the filibuster, and how important will it be to Republican efforts to fight Joe Biden's policies?
Well, I hope that they both manage to hold the line. In order to end the filibuster, it takes all 50 Democrats acting together. Right now, Manchin and Sinema are both saying they're not willing to go along with ending the filibuster. I got to say, Chuck Schumer has demonstrated an ability to put enormous pressure on Democratic members of his conference. And frankly, in the time I've been in the Senate, it's been exceptionally rare to find even a single Democrat with the courage to stand up to Schumer. The act uses screws. I don't know what he uses, but at least if past his prologue, they have managed to have strict uniformity over and over again. It's a world of difference whether they're able to end the filibuster or not. If Manchin and Sinema give in, if they do what Schumer wants and end the filibuster, we will see the most radical legislative agenda ever move through the United States Congress. If they don't give in, if they hold the line and say, no, we're not going to radically break the rules and end the filibuster, then many of the most extreme steps that the Democrats want to take won't happen. So, for example, Democrats want to make the District of Columbia a new state. They want to do that because it would elect 2 Democratic senators, and they want to permanently shift the balance of power. If we keep the filibuster, D.C. will not become a state. If they get rid of the filibuster, D.C. will become a state. Likewise, there are a lot of Democrats that want to pack the U.S. Supreme Court, and add 4 new left-wing judicial activists to the court, take it from 9 justices to 13 justices. If we keep the filibuster, they will not pack the U.S. Supreme Court. No chance of that happening. If they get rid of it, I think there's a very real chance that the Supreme Court does get packed, which would mean that our fundamental rights, our free speech, our religious liberty, our Second Amendment, all of those rights will be profoundly in jeopardy.
Those are pretty high stakes. And I know, in addition, Senator, you've talked very strongly for many years about the regulatory agenda of Democrats, particularly those that kill jobs or have an impact. You come from an energy state. Can you talk about some of the regulatory policies that you're also trying to hold the line on as a Republican?
Well, sure. And unfortunately, even if the Democrats don't have the votes to end the filibuster, a lot of bad policies are going to be enacted the next 2 years and the next 4 years. On the regulatory side, we are already seeing a massive push on executive orders. We're seeing a massive push. The Biden administration is going to lean in hard on the executive and regulatory side. The filibuster won't prevent them from doing that. On the national security and foreign policy side, they're going to lean in vigorously to what they can do unilaterally within the executive. They also will be able to use what's called budget reconciliation, which is a special procedural vehicle that gets around the filibuster. So even if they end the filibuster, we are going to see a massive tax increase in the next couple of months. The Democrats are all committed to an enormous tax increase. I think it will be much, much worse than just repealing the 2017 tax cuts. They're not looking to go back to the status quo ante. They're looking to raise taxes dramatically. I think we will see that push through, and we'll see a big fight of them trying to attach all sorts of other policies to budget reconciliation. On the regulatory side, John, what you just asked, last week I was at the Capitol when Joe Biden gave his inaugural speech. I actually thought it was a pretty good speech. I was very unity. He asked Americans to come together. We need to come together. We are bitterly divided. It's not healthy for this country. But I have to say, he went from giving a speech on unity to the Oval Office where he signed 13 executive orders that basically made a mockery of everything he said about unity just minutes before. One of those executive orders ended the Keystone Pipeline, literally with a stroke of a pen. He made 11,000 jobs disappear. He just eliminated 11,000 construction jobs building that pipeline. 8,000 of those jobs were union members whose jobs went away. And this past week, I've asked multiple Biden cabinet appointees, what do you say to those 11,000 workers whose jobs Joe Biden destroyed with a stroke of a pen? And essentially what their answer was, well, they're out of luck. Today, John Kerry did a press conference where he says, well, they need to make better choices. I don't think the American people need rich, out-of-touch Democrats lecturing them that their job, their livelihood is going to be obliterated. And if they would just listen to their intellectual and moral betters in the Democratic Party, they would choose to do something different with their lives. I think that kind of condescension to working men and women, it certainly doesn't augur well for what the next couple of years are going to hold.
Now, Jessica, you're on the grassroots end of this. You're in touch with all of those millions of Americans that didn't vote for Joe Biden. What is the key now? Obviously, whenever a party loses control, there's a moment of grieving, but then there's a time for organizing. What's going on right now behind the scenes? What is Heritage Action doing to get the troops ready for this battle?
Well, first and foremost, we have an existential front facing every single American across the country, which is this effort against securing the vote and making sure that we have integrity in our elections. Voter fraud is real, rightly concerned about this. So when you look at the threat of election integrity, we really have to have, I think, a two-pronged strategy in dealing with this, both at the federal level and then on the state side. So on the federal level, we're going to be looking to senators like Senator Cruz, some of his conservative colleagues in the House, to do everything that they can to block the federalization of these convenience laws that were in place because of COVID-19 during the November election and now could be made permanent. Mail-in ballots, different ID laws, the timing that's allowed around whether you can vote in person versus not. All of these things are part of this package that Nancy Pelosi has put forward in H.R. 1, which would federalize the election system. If that passes and finds its way onto Biden's desk, it ultimately will put mute everything that's going on the state level. So we really need this two-pronged strategy. I think grassroots are keenly focused on this right now, blocking the federalization of our election system, blocking H.R. 1 and any effort to federalize and make these laws worse, and then beginning to go state by state to tackle some of these election laws that need to be fixed. If you look at the states that are most vulnerable for fraud, for rifles of abuse at the state level, you begin to see a pattern. You see a pattern of neglect from elected officials to take their jobs serious, to hold precincts and electors that are voting accountable. So I think there's a real opportunity for the grassroots to lead, not only to take the list of these are the best practices that should be in place for your state, not only to hold their state up against that list, but then to begin to identify the solutions. So where do we need executive orders put out by a governor? Where do we need model legislation to move through the state legislature? Where do we need to run a ballot initiative that we can then go over the heads? Maybe it's a liberal in the governor's seat and in the state legislature. So all of these efforts are really meant to block the federalization, tackle the state issues on this important issue of election integrity, which is front of mind for any grassroots American for all the right reasons right now today.
Yeah, everywhere we talk to voters and readers, we hear that issue come up time and again. Now we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come right back with Senator Cruz and Jessica right after these messages. All right, folks, welcome back from the commercial break. We are so lucky here at this Just the News special to have Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas with us and Jessica Anderson from Heritage Action for America. And we've been talking about the challenges that lie ahead for the conservative movement for Republicans after the November 2020 election. Senator, I want to turn back to you. You have been a personal target of cancel culture, of censorship, personal threats, even a ban from communist China. How concerned are you about the state of freedom of expression, assembly, and faith? And what are the levers Republicans have to try to force change on those issues?
Well, John, great question. And I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned by the assault that is coming from the far left directed at our freedoms. Right now, we've got a Democratic president. We've got Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. And what we're seeing playing out, it's reminiscent of the end scene in all three of the Godfather movies. If you remember in The Godfather, at the end of each of the movies, Michael Corleone settles his debt, right, and eliminates all his enemies. And that's what the far left is trying to do right now. They're trying to destroy everyone they perceive as their political enemies. They're trying to destroy President Trump because they hate Donald J. Trump with an all-consuming passion. They're trying to destroy conservatives in the Senate, conservatives in Congress. But really, fundamentally, they're trying to destroy all 75 million Americans who voted for President. They're trying to all of us racist, bigoted, ignorant, rude, and they're trying to erase us from American culture. They're going to use every lever they have. That means they're going to use big tech. And Silicon Valley billionaires are using all of their tools to censor, to ban, to silence, to cancel voices with which they disagree. We're going to see the Democrats appointing left-wing judicial activists to the federal judiciary. And those activists will directly assault our free speech, our religious liberty, our Second Amendment. But here's the good news. Despite that assault that is coming on every front, this country remains, I believe, a center-right country. The American people believe fundamentally in common sense conservative values. We believe in low taxes, low regulation, and lots of jobs. We believe in security, securing our borders, standing with law enforcement, standing with the military, defending this nation. And we believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And, one of the things that really confirms that is the Democrats don't campaign on what they believe. Here's the basic dynamic in American elections. Conservatives win when we campaign on the principles we believe in and we're fighting. Liberals win when they obfuscate, when they hide the principles they're fighting for, because whether it is socialism, whether it is open borders, whether it is defunding the police, or whether it is taking away our fundamental liberty, those are not value policies the American people support. So yes, we're going to have to withstand the assault for the next 2 years, the next 3 years on our fundamental liberty. I believe we'll come through this, and we'll come through this even stronger on this.
Yeah, that's going to be a dynamic we're all going to be watching closely. And you mentioned President Trump, and there are 70 to 80 million Americans, Jessica, that voted for him and are still energized 3 months after the election. How does the Trump movement impact the mission ahead for conservatives, and what dangers await Democrats, let's say in some of the blue-collar swing districts where Trump remains popular?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, John. It would be a total mistake for Republican leadership, either in the party or in Congress, to forget the reasons that so many people turned out for Trump in 2016. They were unhappy with the economy. They were concerned about the political correctness and the big grip, the early grip of cancel culture. They were frustrated with illegal immigration and illegals draining social services. And they were eager for not only an economic comeback, but a cultural one. And so these issues drove people out in 2016. They have certainly evolved over the last 4 years, but in no way have they gone away. These are still issues that we are talking about in one way or the other today. And this is the Trump coalition, and it's going to move forward whether President Trump is a part of it or he decides to take some time off and golf and vacation with his family. Regardless, these issues are not going away. And in particular, when you look at the working class or blue collar Americans, they have increasingly sided with the conservative economic policy and labor policy and high wages and opportunity and growth, because these are the solutions that help their families. They help their families, that helps their jobs, and it puts America first. So at a time when the country is craving really moving forward and opening up the economy and allowing kids to fully return to school, this is the time for unity. Unfortunately, the left thinks that unity means uniformity, and they're coming after every single one of us that voted for something different. This is why the fight must continue. It must be at the grassroots level. It must be energized and focused, not only when we look at the election integrity stuff, but when we look at the legislative issues that are at stake, things that will end up in the courts, and then certainly the angst around Biden's heavy hand with his executive orders the first week that he's been in office. So I think overall, conservatives like Senator Cruz, like Heritage Action, we want these Americans to be part of the tent, be part of the movement, and push back against this effort from the left to cancel every single one of us.
Senator, I've seen you chair hearings where really important oversight was committed, whether it was on the Russia case or other important issues. In addition, the Center has that incredible power of advising consent with all of the personas that personify Joe Biden's policies in the cabinet. Tell me, how important is it going to be to vet these nominees, to do oversight at these agencies as these massive policy changes take effect? What will Republicans be focused on in both of those issues?
Well, it's incredibly important. And one of the worst consequences of the Democrats taking the majority in the Senate, of Chuck Schumer becoming majority leader, is that they have control of the agenda, that Schumer controls what comes to the floor, what gets a vote, and the Democrats get all the gavel. So I have been, the last several years, the chairman of the Constitutional Subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and also the chairman of the Aviation and Space Subcommittee of the Senate Commerce. And with those two subcommittees that I chaired, I was able to convene hearings over and over and over again. For example, multiple hearings looking at big tech censorship, looking at the Silicon Valley billionaires silencing the voices of Americans with which they disagree. I guarantee you the Democrats are not going to have hearings on big tech censorship. And the reason is simple. They support it. They're telling Silicon Valley, censor even more, silence even more. You know, look, a lot of Democratic senators, if they could, they'd shut this show down right now because we're not towing the line of orthodoxy that they stand. So we are also, particularly 6 months, going to be engaged in a and going to be engaged in the process of considering and many of the Biden nominees and sub-cabinet nominees. That is a very important responsibility. I hope that Republicans stand together and do everything we can to stop some of the worst and most extreme nominees. We're just a couple of weeks in, but I got to say, I've seen a disturbing pattern. One, multiple Biden nominees really embracing communist China, really trying to turn around. So I asked multiple Biden nominees, if they would commit to keeping Huawei, giant Chinese telecom company, on the list that prohibits U.S. technology from going to them. Every one of them has refused to answer that question. They're flirting with basically reopening and jumping back into bed with Communist China. Just today on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, considered the nomination of Joe Biden's nominee to be the ambassador to the United Nations. And this nominee, she gave in October of 2019 a paid speech to a Confucius Institute. Confucius Institute is paid for by Communist China, a Chinese Communist government, and they are major platforms for propaganda and espionage in American universities. I led bipartisan legislation in the Senate that passed into law to crack down on Confucius Institutes and has resulted in dozens of Confucius Institutes being closed. Well, Biden's UN ambassador nominee gave a paid speech at a Confucius Institute where she praised Communist China and essentially was a cheerleader for Communist China and said that America could learn from the example of China and billions that it is putting in Africa, trapping developing countries in debt servitude, which gives China control over their policies. And I got to say, it really is profoundly misguided. There's a pattern of it across the board of Biden nominees. I think one of the big foreign policy shifts we're going to see over the next 4 years is a massive move to cozy up communist China at the expense of U.S. national security interests. And it is the confirmation hearings where we have the ability to shine the light and press that scrutiny. I'm certainly going to continue doing that, and I hope other Republicans do as well.
It's pretty clear. We've got about a couple minutes left. I wanted to throw this question to both of you just real quickly. Every time the Republicans have succeeded in taking back control, it's always been on the strength of ideas, on the strength of a message, on the strength of values. As you head into the 2022 elections, what is going to be the message that Republicans and conservatives can tell the American public that differentiates them from Joe Biden and the Democrats? Senator, I'll start with you and we'll finish up in a second.
Well, listen, freedom works. Free markets are better than social. Liberty is better than government control. Our fundamental right, free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment, they protect diversity, they protect the ability of each to make choices for ourselves and our family. Those are values. And let me say, the work Jessica did back to the Sentinels are incredibly effective for being voices. We have to win heart and mind. Mainstream media do that means we got to find around. That's why last year a podcast called Verdict Cruz became the #1 ranked podcast in the world. We've had over 20 million downloads. By last year, one vote away from the Supreme Court seat in history, it became the #1 bestseller on Amazon. All of that is designed to get out the mainstream media, get straight to the American people with common sense. Because we've got to win hearts. We've got to turn people out. That's how we retake the country in 2022, and that's how we continue to do so in 2020.
That makes a lot of sense. Jessica, we'll give you the last word. What is that message that's going to resonate with that great grassroots audience you're working with?
Policies that represent opportunities for all Americans. We need to get back to the basics. How do you provide an economic policy for family, for culture, for schools, education, every single issue that we look at? Where do you have the most freedom and the most opportunity for every single American? We have to throw out this playbook of providing favoritism to some at the expense of another. Trump fought for that. Conservatives need to carry that forward as we look at these critical fights. And to the point that the senator made earlier, these nominations that Biden has put forward, this is the first opportunity for conservatives in the Senate to truly hold the line. It's not enough to wring their hands and complain about the executive orders. This is an opportunity to treat these nominees that we know what they are, which is personnel, is policy. So not only should we be providing this clear roadmap for voters for opportunity for all and favoritism to none, but using every single opportunity tool at the disposal of senators with these nominations to expose the difference the real difference in what the liberal left wants for America versus where conservatives are advocating for. Thanks for having us, John.
Well, listen, it's been an honor to have you both on, Senator Jessica. Thank you so much. All right, folks, a few months ago here at Just the News at Real America's Voice, we featured Heritage Action's Police Pledge in our Just the News special, Blue Courage. Many of you tuned in and signed on to that pledge, and I thought it'd be a great time to come on back and remember what that was about and what's happened since then. So take a look first at this clip that we have.
Today, we launch Fight for America to advocate for American values and institutions, to champion the law enforcement.
I work with exceptional deputies, police officers. We have people that truly want to get out there and do good. I am very happy that the Heritage Foundation and Heritage Action are willing to stand up, are willing to speak for the silent majority, to say that we still believe in what our founding fathers believed in.
All right, I want to bring in now Garrett Best, the Vice President of Heritage Action, to give us an update on what's happened with the Heritage Action Police Pledge since that last special.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate you having me on. Today you're talking about hold the line, but, over the course of the summer with the unrest and everything, conservatives around the country were anxious to show support for the thin blue line that defends us day in and day out. And being on the front lines of that fight with our grassroots network, Heritage Action developed a simple and easy way for Americans everywhere to express their support for law enforcement by signing a police pledge. Fairly simple, push back against the left's effort to defund our police departments. And it was an astounding success. I mean, not that we weren't aware that so many people felt that way, but to have almost 250,000 Americans in just a couple weeks put their name on the line to say, yes, I stand with my police and against the left's effort to demonize and ultimately get rid of them. And so it was an astounding grassroots success.
If I remember, 250,000 citizens, or nearly 250,000 citizens, 20 members of the Senate, 170 some odd members of the House. Those are some pretty big numbers. I've seen a lot of pledges, pledge drives in Washington in my 30 years as a reporter. Those are some really big numbers.
Yes, it was fantastic. I mean, and that doesn't even count the hundreds of local and state officials that signed as well.
That's right.
Governors, but we also had state legislators. We had county mayors and county council officials, and it was just a really good opportunity for Americans, both private individuals, but also elected officials to defend our police. A lot of times these pledges are designed to be sort of a fundraising tool or sort of a shtick, so to speak.
Right.
This was nothing about that. This was a genuine effort to, in the midst of COVID lockdowns across the country, to make a very simple way for people, no matter where they were, to say that they stand with police. So, astounding success.
Well, we're so glad you were able to bring us up to date. We like to always go back and check what happened after we've done a special like this, and we're so grateful, Garrett, for your work and for that update. Folks, we're going to come right back after this commercial break with more of Hold the Line.
We're just normal people talking about the issues, the way the American people talk about them around their dinner table. I think that's why people like the show. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We give them news, opinion, sports, comedy, entertainment, music, but most of all, we try to give them love of country, faith, and family every night. We think political news is a big tent. Come on in, live from Studio 6B, 8 to 10 weeknights. You might like it.
All right, welcome back to Hold the Line, our Just the News special event, sponsored by our friends at Heritage Action for America. Now, in any effort to renew, rebuild, and resurge, political operatives look to the grassroots of their movement. That effort often starts with vetting a new president's cabinet. Now, Joe Biden has named several nominees to his cabinet. Some of them have already been confirmed by Congress. Others are facing questions about their past and how their policies might affect everything from the price of gas to the security of our border going forward. To help us sort all this out, the battle over the nominees, how it's playing out here in Washington. We've brought in an all-star panel, 3 experts. Mike Howell, senior advisor at the Heritage Foundation, who previously served in the Trump administration at the Department of Homeland Security. Marie Fishpaw, director of domestic policy studies at the Heritage Foundation, another Washington veteran. And May Davis, a former legal advisor to President Trump on policies ranging from healthcare and immigration to social issues. Welcome, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. All right, Mike, let me start with you. Joe Biden's nominee for Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, has been a lightning rod for several years now. We at Just the News have reported on how the Homeland Security watchdog, the Inspector General, investigated him back in 2015 and concluded that he showed inappropriate favoritism. There's also the concern about rolling back Trump's border protections. All this is wrapped up in his confirmation process. Tell us what's been going on and what are the odds for his confirmation?
Well, there's actually a lot of news on this today. Senator Cornyn announced that, they were going to essentially hold it up and invoke a filibuster on it, which means that it'll be delayed a few days. Now, it's very likely that the left and the Democrats are in lockstep and able to get to, the 51 votes with Vice President Harris being the deciding vote. But there's a lot of concerns coming from Hill Republicans. I mean, you mentioned that DOJ or DHS OIG report on his interference into EB-5 adjudications. So what this really was political favoritism at the highest levels of the Department of Homeland Security, basically greasing the wheels and involving, Mr. Mayorkas in the adjudication of politically favorable clients. Now, I was actually on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee when we were interviewing Mr. Mayorkas, and news of this broke. It hadn't been mentioned before. And when confronted with it, it wasn't exactly the best meeting. And that really colored the interaction between him and the senators. They didn't get the answers they needed. And he was confirmed strictly down party lines in that vote because the IG report was still pending. It was unheard of at that point in time to have someone with an ongoing IG investigation into them be confirmed to the number 2 spot at the Department of Homeland Security. Now, aside from the problems of corruption that are so associated with Mr. Mayorkas, there's the real question of what policies will he, enact and how will he handle the department. And luckily here, we don't have to do a lot of guesswork at all. They've been abundantly clear about what he will do. And it's very easy for Senate Republicans to say whether they're for amnesty and for open borders in this vote for his confirmation. Now, what he will do is already tell ICE and CBP to stand down. We saw this executive order coming out of the White House. He will build upon that. Luckily, the federal judge in Texas said we need a temporary restraining order on this because it appears unconstitutional. So we hope that holds up. But keep in mind, this is their MO. It is what Mayorkas is sent there to do. Just like he was sent to head the USCIS and then the deputy secretary, to be an extension of the party apparatus to carry out these sort of political objectives. Now, additionally, we have the border wall. Now, what surprised me most in Mr. Mayorkas' confirmation hearing is that not only did he say that they'll, stop all construction of new wall. Keep in mind, this is wall Congress has already funded and agreed to fund, but he's going to do one step further. He's looking at tearing down existing wall. His only holdup is if his lawyers let him. He said so in the confirmation hearing. Now, that makes 0 sense and is completely indicative of a nominee who seeks only to carry out, political objectives at the department. Now, keep in mind, there's tons of things that the administration has already done in this regard, whether it's opening up the border. They're going to seek to end Title 42, which is COVID protection on the border where we can turn people around. They're going to end the Remain in Mexico program, whereby people wait south of the border while their asylum claims are being adjudicated instead of catch and release. This is an open borders guy through and through. And it's about this policy that senators need to keep in mind when they're looking at this vote. Right. They all pretty much have expressed they're against open borders and against massive amnesty. And Mayorkas is seeking to carry out the 11 million that President Biden wants in his legislation. But keep in mind, even if they don't get that, Mr. Mayorkas has indicated he'll seek to move administratively to grant amnesty. And he's the architect of the DACA program. The DACA program, which is an unconstitutional program, also under court review. So he's going to work around if Congress doesn't give him the bill they want. So senators have a chance here to firmly say whether they're against open borders and amnesty, because there's no way to move this nominee forward unless you're for those things, because we know exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, that's really true, Joe. And it's when they say elections have consequences, the immigration policy is going to be one of those places where Americans are really going to feel the consequences, see change that's going on there. Marie, let me turn to you for a second. Another of Joe Biden's nominees is the former California Attorney General Xavier Becerra. He's been nominated to head Health and Human Services. His nomination is garnering plenty of opposition as well. Senator Tom Cotton has called Becerra a culture warrior, unworthy of leading the top health job in America. There's others who are questioning his lack of health policy credentials. Tell us what's going on there and what conservatives are doing to try to oppose his nomination.
He is an incredibly disappointing choice. As you said, we are in the middle of a pandemic where the decisions of government leaders, particularly in this role, literally impact both lives and livelihoods. So you want a steady, experienced, and balanced hand in charge of an agency that can impact so much. But instead, in this nominee, we're really seeing the opposite. We are seeing someone who doesn't have the experience he needs. His primary experience in healthcare is literally suing nuns who didn't want to follow an Obamacare mandate and had religious exemptions to providing contraception because it violated their core religious beliefs. So this is a man who sued nuns. He's also supported providing taxpayer funding for elective abortions for all 9 months of pregnancy. These are radical positions. And I think there's a real possibility that the Biden administration is setting up HHS to be one of these places where their radicals can go to get their wish list advanced. Because if you look at this nominee in comparison to some of the others who are a bit more moderate for Democrats, we're seeing someone with a real radical agenda who doesn't have the leadership skills, the leadership experience he needs to really lead the agency. So Heritage and Heritage Action is working hard to call attention to these facts and demand that we need better for Americans right now.
May, we got a couple more minutes in this segment. I want to turn to you. You've worked in the White House. You know that OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, is one of the most powerful agencies in all of government because it controls the purse strings and the powers of regulation. What is your assessment of Biden's choice to run OMB? Nera Tanden, she's a former head of a liberal think tank, the Center for American Progress, and there's been a lot of controversy in the media since her name surfaced as a nominee. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, so OMB is a very powerful agency that both sets the budget priorities for the president and then also reviews all the regulations that come out of the agencies and can pump the brakes. They can speed up the process and they can rejigger agency regulations. So the person that needs to lead this needs to be somebody who's committed to the law, somebody who understands the role of government and understands the limits of government. That person is unlikely to be Nera Tanden, who's most notorious for being a mean person on Twitter. She recently deleted 1,000 tweets that attacked everyone from U.S. senators to people's wives. She is known for punching a reporter who asked a question that she didn't like. And I would expect pushback on the left from people who thought that this is going to be a unity moment. This is going to be a golden age for politics. But really, you should see pushback from any senator who respects their own job, respects the role of the legislature. Because Nera Tanden is a big government partisan. And she is going to oversee the Biden policy of equity being promulgated in regulation from every agency. And equity might not mean anything in the atmosphere, but put into regulations, that means, well, when we're thinking about COVID policy, and let's just say we can reduce COVID exposure for 50 people, but it'll lose 100,000 jobs. I understand cost benefit. But what I don't understand is, well, if it's unfair that those 50 people are exposed to COVID, then maybe the equitable thing to do would be to promulgate that anyway. And so what you're going to see with a big government partisan in charge of this agency is big government policies being promulgated in every agency in pursuit of equity. which American people may or may not agree is fair for them.
And Nera has been a prolific writer. We know where she comes from all of her writings at the Center for American Progress and other things. We're going to come back. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to start to talk about, we've talked about the persons and their backgrounds. Now we want to talk about what impact the policies are going to have on everyday Americans. But first, let's go to this commercial break. Folks, welcome back from the commercial break, and we're going to continue this discussion about the nominees and their policies that personify the change in Washington that Joe Biden has brought. Just before we went to the commercial break, we were talking to May Davis, and I want to pick up on something, May, you said, because we obviously, when the confirmation process starts, a lot of the focus is on the person, their record. But over time, what becomes the more impactful thing to everyday Americans is the policies that they carry out, the initiatives and decisions that they make in their agencies up and down government. I want to ask you something. We are seeing a lot of things going on right now. You see a fast rise in gas prices just since Joe Biden was elected. That's going to hit the middle class, right? There are these climate policies targeting oil drilling, fracking, and other energy sources. Lots of jobs have already been eliminated, thousands more likely to be their union jobs. When you look at this, how are these early policies playing out in middle America?
Well, I think they're a slap in the face to Americans who have taken an economic crisis and looked at their budgets to cut $5 here, $100 there, and it's going to be wiped out in increased energy costs. And for what? For what? So this is about virtue signaling. The Keystone Pipeline, canceling the Keystone Pipeline just means that we're going to have to ship that same oil on railroads or buy it from Saudi Arabia. Last time I checked, solar panels were not created from thin air. They are created by countries who have forced labor policies and who have much dirtier energy than you would find in a westernized country. And finally, these energy sources are not ones we can replace. We don't all want to become California with rolling blackouts and the governor's suggestion of just keep your thermostat to 78 and you should be okay. So liberals are playing politics with middle America and their actual lives, and it's unfair.
You know, Marie, one of the things that we often talk about in politics is policies sometimes go over people's heads. There's alphabet soup in them, but there are real consequences. And I know a lot of people have pointed to California as sort of a test bed for a lot of the Biden policies, since many of his appointees hail from there, including the vice president herself, Kamala Harris. What work does Heritage Action and other people do to try to personify the consequences of policies, make them understandable? People are busy, they're running, taking care of kids, going to school, cooking dinners, going to work. How do you boil down the consequences of some of these policies so that they become tangible at the dinner table, the water cooler, even the boardroom?
Well, we spend a lot of time explaining what a lever of government being changed means for a family or an American individual. So, for example, Heritage scholars last year took a really hard look at the left's ultimate goal for healthcare, which is to outlaw private coverage and put us all in a government plan. And we took a hard look at what that would mean for your pocketbook in terms of increased taxes and, more importantly, less of an ability to choose the kind of coverage you want. So I think you'll see Heritage do a lot of that with our partners in Heritage Action over the next few years, trying to really crystallize the stakes we face from policy changes.
Yeah, the stakes are high and they're tangible and in this fast-moving world. Are any of you, and Mike, let me throw this one to you quickly, are you worried that the ability to communicate these messages are going to run into some of the cancel culture, the censorship that you've seen? Is there any fear that the ability to get the grassroots informed is going to be infringed upon by some of the censorship tactics that we've seen become more aggressive even since Election Day? What do you think about that, Mike?
Look, absolutely, big tech is big left. They're going to try to shut it down as much as they can, but afraid? Absolutely not. I think the left's going to say, if you're not for an open border and unlimited immigration, you're a racist Neanderthal. And honestly, that trick is tired. People are over it. They see right through it. And we're here to, help point out the real consequences of what they want to do. If Mayorkas becomes Secretary of Homeland Security, all roads lead to open borders, mass immigration. It means criminal aliens released into your neighborhoods and onto their streets. It means your schools being crowded with the influx and surge of illegal aliens. It means economic, in this economic crisis, we have millions more eligible workers in the United States. All of the above are things that everyone can understand. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it. And so folks need to stand up, and we're hoping for leadership from the Senate to really fight on these issues.
Yeah, that is key. Your frontline defenders are in that Capitol, in that Congress, trying to hold the line, as this special says. I want to end, we got about 3 minutes here. I want to end with a question and throw it to each of you and give you a moment to think about it. Joe Biden ran as the blue-collar guy, the champion of the middle class, but right away, the people in the middle class, people in working trades are feeling the impact of his jobs. They've seen their jobs go away. They're seeing more of their money go into their gas tank already. They may see increases in their health care like they did under Obamacare. Union workers were disproportionately harmed by Obamacare's marketplace solution. What are the messages that conservatives can deliver directly to those families in the middle class and the blue-collar world? What's the message that you think is going to resonate for conservatism with them? Mike, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think our policies are positive visions for America, and they're actionable. They've worked where they've been tried. And fortunately for the conservative movement, what a contrast we have to what the left is trying to do. I mean, our position is that we should have a fair and orderly immigration policy that puts American interests first. And what a contrast to mass immigration, open borders, releasing criminal illegal aliens, crowding our schools, et cetera, down the line. These are kitchen table conversations. Your health insurance goes up when a legal alien shows up to the emergency room and can't pay for their health insurance. These are things that show up and down the line. Illegal immigration connects to every single policy issue. And so we're going to be making those connections, making the case, educating folks, advocating for folks, and pushing for solutions on Capitol Hill where our senators can actually stand up. If you're against open borders and you're against mass amnesty and criminals being released onto our streets, then you better hold the line against Alejandro Mayorkas.
Hold the line. That's what we keep hearing tonight. Marie, what do you think? What's a message that's going to resonate at the dinner table tonight?
Well, so many Americans are concerned rightly about whether they and their families and the ones that they love can get health care when they need it. And we've seen under President Trump that he took a lot of steps to make healthcare more accessible and affordable for people. Of course, he was demonized by the left because he didn't support big government. He supported freedom to help make that happen. So the left is going to try to impose the same failed approaches that they took, which resulted in under Obamacare costs going up and your choices going down. And if you're sick, making it a lot harder if you're on an Obamacare plan to see a doctor that takes care of the special needs that you have. So I think that freedom really does produce better outcomes for people and the things that they care most immediately about. And we're going to be standing up at Heritage and with our partners in Heritage Action to make sure that we know that conservatives have a better path forward as we stand against what the left is trying to do.
May, you get the bat cleaned up here. What's your favorite message? What's going to resonate in the base of America, in Main Street of America?
For me, it's pretty clear that conservatives want to give you, the governed, a voice because this is a democracy. And the liberals want to take that voice and give it to unelected bureaucrats who know better than you know, who are smarter than you, and who can run your life better than you can. And it's unfair, it's undemocratic, it's un-American. And the last chance we have to prevent the big government takeover of American lives is right now with the Senate to say no to big government partisan bureaucrats.
50-50 in the Senate. What a wild ride the next 2 years are going to be. I really want to thank you all for joining us today, May and Mike and Maria. A really great conversation. We're going to be keeping tabs on all you're doing. Hope to have you back on the show sometime soon to follow up on these great issues. All right, it's hard to imagine, but we're almost ready to wrap this great hour conversation. But before we go, we're joined by one last special guest. Janae Strachey, the Grassroots Director for Heritage Action for America, joins us. Janae, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know folks are watching this show. They're everywhere across America, and they're saying, I'm concerned by what I heard here, but what can I do? I'm just one person. I'm in the real world. I'm far from Washington, far from the Beltway. What can a grassroots organization like Heritage do to reach out and activate everyday Americans in these policy fights that we've been discussing tonight?
That's right. Well, that's a common question I hear from so many people. This isn't new. We sit and watch the news, we're frustrated, and people find themselves just yelling at the TV and wondering, how do I stop this? What can I do? Well, the first thing you can do is join Heritage Action's Sentinel family. We've got an army of grassroots activists just like you all across this country. Who did the same thing. They wanted to make a difference, and so they joined like-minded people. One of my favorite things to tell people is that your voice is already more powerful than you think it is. Most people don't take action. They just stay at home yelling at their TV. They don't write or contact their members or senators. So that alone is more powerful. But when you join your voice with thousands of other conservatives across this country at the most impactful time, you're going to see the influence of your voice. So we at Heritage Action want to equip you to do that. You can go to heritageaction.com/sentinel. You'll be able to find out all the information there. You can also text NOMS to 51776. That's NOMS, NOMS, at 51776. So if you text that to 51776, you'll get all the information you need back. We'll get you connected with a regional coordinator who lives in your area, connect you with like-minded Sentinels. And I'm telling you, there's so many ways to get involved. There's so many ways to make your voice powerful and amplified. So whatever your skill set is, there's a place for you.
It's so good to remember that even though you have a day job and you got to take care of the kids, you got to run the errands, that you could still make a difference in the political sphere just by taking a plunge, just by hitting that text number, by calling in, reaching out to like-minded Americans and getting activated. Janae, thanks for joining us tonight. That was fantastic, and we'll make sure people know how to get to that URL. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up for the night. I want to thank you for joining us on this Just the News special. Hold the line, rebuild, renew, resurge. We hope we brought you inside a process that a lot of Americans don't get to see, how a political movement reboots after a major election loss. I've enjoyed the conversation. I want to thank Senator Cruz, Jessica Anderson, Janae, all the great guests that we had tonight. And I hope you have a great night with your family.